Ooh-wee. Okay, welcome to a new episode of Nate's MMA Corner. I am Nate, and if you watch my show, you're in my corner. Okay, so today's episode is a double header, post-fight show for McGregor versus Siver, and a pre-fight show for the main card of Gustafsson versus Anthony Johnson. And so let's get started with post-fight recap of the main card of Conor McGregor versus Dennis Siver. And that was a pretty intense card, top to bottom. And yes, the main event was a featherweight clash with Conor McGregor and Dennis the Menace Siver in the 145-pound division. And yeah, this fight, wow, I totally underestimated Conor McGregor here. I am a Conor McGregor fan, but as I've said previously in previous episodes, I am a bigger Dennis Siver fan, and I was hoping Dennis Siver would win, and I thought he came in with a good game plan. He went in, tried to land some leg kicks, and then used the strikes to work some takedowns. And yeah, it wasn't working out. It didn't work out. Dennis Siver got rocked in that first round, and then he got finished in that second round. And yeah, that was second round TKO punches victory for Conor McGregor. And Conor McGregor, he found his reach pretty quick, and his takedown defense held up pretty well. And a lot of people are forgetting Conor McGregor is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he trains with Gunnar Nelson, who is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And his ground game, we don't really see a whole lot of it, but he has it. And I got a feeling that if he ever does get taken down by a wrestler down the line, that he won't be totally clueless. I think Conor McGregor's the real deal, and he definitely has a good shot at beating Jose Aldo and winning that featherweight championship of the world. Yeah, so that sums up the main event of this explosive, exciting card. And then the co-main event was Donald Cowboy Cerrone versus Ben Smooth Henderson in a lightweight clash. One of Ben Henderson's 3-rounders in first time in a long time. And yeah, I, like a lot of people, had Benson Henderson winning this fight. Donald Cerrone, he had some good moments in there. He had a takedown or two, but those takedowns didn't last very long, and Benson Henderson was able to pop right back up and land some good combinations and really work his movement, his footwork, just really do a points match on Cowboy Cerrone. And Benson Henderson's good at scoring points on opponents and squeaking out those decisions. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It gets annoying after a while for some people. Like me, it can get annoying, but if it's one of my favorite fighters, which Benson Henderson is, and as long as he wins a fight, that's all I really care about. And yeah, but in this case, it went against him. The judges, I think, got it wrong. And yeah, it was a 29-28 unanimous decision win for Donald Cowboy Cerrone. I don't know what kind of fight the judges saw in this fight, but it is what it is. And as I say, don't leave it in the hands of the judges. So Cowboy Cerrone is on, I believe, a 7-fight win streak, and it's pretty much looking as a lightweight title shot next, or a match with Khabib Nurmagomedov when he comes back. Yeah, then in the also on the main card in the middleweight division, we had Uriah Hall versus Ron Stallings, and this was a first round finish, TKO doctor stoppage for Uriah Hall. Yeah, I kind of knew that Uriah Hall would probably win this fight in the second round, given Ron Stallings' his record, I believe, was like 12-6 or so, roughly around there. Coming into this match, he was a late replacement, and this was putting him up against a really tough veteran in the UFC and a Ultimate Fighter 17 finalist in Uriah Hall, who's known for his striking, and he could win matches by submission too. Yeah, Uriah Hall, he did his thing, and it just, he wanted to do a little bit more and have the fight last a little bit longer to showcase more of his talent. But yeah, I think the doctors, they called it good. I mean, those cuts were pretty deep on Ron Stallings. Ron Stallings had some big gashes on his face that were pretty deep. Yeah, it was pretty deep and a lot of blood. So, man, yeah, it was a tough one. But yeah, Uriah Hall, he made it look easy for the most part and got the TKO victory due to doctor stoppage in the first round. Yeah, then to kick off the main card, we had Gleison Tibau versus Norman Parke. Now, Norman Parke was the Vegas favorite in this fight, but a lot of the critics were picking Gleison Tibau to win, and wow, Gleison Tibau, in my opinion, was one of the most impressive fighters top to bottom on this whole card. Him and probably Conor McGregor. Gleison Tibau, the way he just really used his footwork, and he landed some good combinations in Norman Parke. And Gleison Tibau's heavy hands, and he really rocked Norman Parke a couple times throughout the match. And Gleison Tibau, he was been fighting on the prelims for ages in the UFC. He's had well over 20 fights in the UFC, and I just thought, Gleison Tibau, this is another moment where he's coming off a couple wins, and then he fights a big hot shot that's young, up and coming in Norman Parke, and Norman Parke brings him back down, beats him by decision, and then we see Gleison Tibau back on the prelims. He wins another match or two, and then fights. It was like just a repeat process with Gleison Tibau's career, looking at his track record. But yeah, Norman Parke, he was 4-0-1, I believe it was, in his UFC record coming into this match. So I was like, why would he lose? But Gleison Tibau, he just was working a striking clinic on each and every round on Norman Parke, rounds 1, 2, and 3, and got a split decision win on Norman Parke, and I think it should have been at least 29-28 unanimous decision win for Gleison Tibau. He looked impressive, and I think Gleison Tibau definitely needs to fight a top 10, top 15 opponent in his next match. There's a lot of good prospects for him to fight that could really bring him up that ladder a bit more. And yeah, Gleison, wow, I'm happy for him. I mean, he's paid his dues in the UFC. I remember him, back in 2008, 2009, fighting in the UFC 80s and UFC 90s, and wow, to see him, on a main card on Fox Sports 1, getting that win over Norman Parke, that was pretty impressive. Norman Parke, he's Ultimate Fighter winner in the smashes. So that wraps up. Excuse me, my throat's a little sore. Yeah, Norman Parke. Yeah, he'll learn from this loss, and he'll come back bigger, better, stronger. He's still young. He still has a lot of fights under him that he can work on, and he trains at Alliance, and he's just, the kid's too talented. He'll come back. Yeah, then let's get going with the pre-fight show for Gustafsson versus Johnson. Okay, so this is UFC on Fox. Alexander Gustafsson versus Anthony Johnson, a light heavyweight bout to determine the #1 contender for the UFC light heavyweight championship against John Jones. And Alexander Gustafsson is ranked #1 last time I checked on the rankings in UFC, and Anthony Johnson is ranked #3. And Anthony Johnson, he's fought at welterweight, middleweight, light heavyweight, and he can land some good heavy shots. And he says he's worked on his footwork and quickness and not being so flat-footed. But I think it's not going to be enough against a top prospect like Alexander Gustafsson, who put up a battle against John Jones in his first match with him. And I think that ultimately Alexander Gustafsson will win this fight by submission in rounds 3 or 4, maybe round 5. I don't see him knocking out Anthony Johnson. I mean, it could happen, but I think Gustafsson's best bet is to wear him out with the strikes and pace himself, and Anthony Johnson will get worn out in rounds 3 and 4, tired, gas out, and eventually Gustafsson will be able to take him down and submit him. I think that's the best game plan for Alexander in this fight, and I think something along those lines will happen, whether it's he knocks him out later in the fight or submits him. But I see Alexander, I'm picking Alexander to win this fight, like a lot of people are. Then also on the main card for this, we have Dan Henderson versus Gegard Mousasi. For some reason, Gegard Mousasi is the favorite in this fight, according to Vegas odds. And I want Gegard Mousasi to win this fight. I like Dan Henderson too, but I do feel like he should retire. You know, no disrespect to Dan Henderson, big fan of him, but he's lost so many fights in a row, and you know I don't picture him really doing a whole lot against top 5 ranked guys in the middleweight division. You know, I mean, light heavyweight was tough enough for him, and middleweight, the top 5 guys have the tools. They can wrestle and strike with Dan Henderson. And Gegard Mousasi, though, he's not known for his wrestling. He can be taken down at ease. We saw it in the King Mo fight in Strikeforce. Yeah, Gegard Mousasi, he's known as a kickboxer. He was Strikeforce champion, and yeah, you know, it's his striking that's got him places. But ultimately, Dan Henderson has heavy hands, and he's gonna eventually take down Gegard Mousasi, and I think either win by unanimous decision laying on top of him, or just pound him out and eventually maybe submit him. So I'm picking Dan Henderson to win this fight either by unanimous decision or, yeah, finish ground and pound or submission in from a dominant position on top, somewhere in the middle of the fight. Yeah, then also on the main card we have Phil Davis versus Ryan Bader. Yeah, this is a light heavyweight clash. 2 collegiate wrestlers. They wrestled in college in a tournament together. Phil Davis got the better in the wrestling game. He won the college wrestling match. Ryan Bader, though, he's Ultimate Fighter Season 8 winner. And, you know, I think Phil Davis' striking has come a long way, training an alliance with Alexander Gustafsson and getting good tips and strategies from Eric Del Fioro and Dominic Cruz. I think that if this were Phil Davis a few years ago when his striking was not what it is now, he would struggle a bit, but I think he could knock out Ryan Bader or use the striking to set up takedowns and out-wrestle him. So I'm picking Phil Davis to win this fight by either knockout midway in the fight or unanimous decision. But it'll be a tough fight for Phil Davis. It won't be the biggest cakewalk. I mean, Ryan Bader, he can take some hard shots, and you know, he's been through some battles. I mean, Ryan Bader, you know, he put up a war against OSP and Within St. Proof, and yeah, it's like you know, I want Ryan Bader to win this, but I think Phil Davis has the tools to win this. He's ready, he's prepared, and I think this is Phil Davis getting that much closer to an eventual title shot. Yeah, so then to kick off the main card, we have a featherweight clash with Akira Corsani and Sam Sicilia. Now, both these guys are fighting for their UFC careers for the most part. I mean, if either one of these guys lose another fight, I don't picture the UFC keeping them. And I think that Sam Sicilia may pull off the win here. I think he will eventually use his strikes and just possibly out-grapple Kira Corsani, or grapple him enough where Kira Corsani is worried about getting taken down, and then he's going to have his hands down to try to block the takedowns, and then Sam Sicilia will be able to knock him out. A lot of people, it seems like a lot of people have been knocking out Kira Corsani lately, and I think Sam Sicilia, he could be knocked out, but I think the pressure of Akira winning in Sweden, him being a Swedish-based fighter, it's going to be hard for him to deal with. He's lost in Sweden before, and I think Sam Sicilia gets the upset here and wins the fight. But I got this fight pretty much borderline 50-50. I mean, I'm just calling it on a whim that Sam Sicilia wins, but if Akira Corsani wins, then that won't shock me either. So, but if I really had to pick, it'd be Sam Sicilia. And that wraps up the pre-fight show for Gustafsson versus Johnson. And stay tuned for my next episode, which will be about the post-fight for this. So until then, see ya.